Hello, good afternoon to my friends who are joining us on the East Coast. Good morning to those of you on the West Coast, and good evening to those of you who are joining us from Europe. My name is Randi Braun. I'm an author, executive coach, and CEO of the women's leadership firm, Something Major. I am so excited to be here with you today for our panel discussion on Women at Work 2023, launching your best year ever. And as we get started, I would absolutely, positively love to hear from all of you. I want to hear, where are you joining us from? We've had people join Something Major events from my backyard here in the Washington, D.C. region to live joins from Australia, Europe, Canada, the West Coast. So I'd love to hear where everyone is joining us from. And as we wait for those to come in, I just want to keep it real with everybody. We know it's really been a time for women at work. That's the only way I know how to describe it. It's been a time. And we've needed some fresh tools to level up our fulfillment, to level up our impact, and to really make our goals things that happen this year. Knowing how much opportunity there is to make this our best year ever, I put together what I consider to be an all-star panel of some of my friends and colleagues who I'm privileged to have with us today. And I'll be introducing them in just a moment. We're going to be talking about a few things today when we talk about how we can launch our best year ever. We're going to talk about top trends that are influencing workplace culture and the dynamics that you need to know and be aware of to make sure that you're navigating the new work world in the ways that are going to serve your goals and priorities. We're going to talk about tips for effective planning and prioritization so that you can show up for yourself the way that you show up for everyone else. And we're going to go ahead and be answering your questions. And I'm learning that our chat is disabled from hearing from you guys. So let me see if I can fix that. Unfortunately, I can't fix that. So actually, if you're willing to, I'll even take it in the Q&A. Go ahead and throw where you're joining from in the Q&A so we can go ahead and see that, and we'll see what we can do to get chat fixed in just a second. Is it a Zoom meeting if there is not some kind of technology mishap or fail? It's a question I think that all the stages will be asking for all of time to come. Without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel in just a moment. So again, if I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, my name's Randi Braun. I run a women's leadership coaching and advisory firm, called Something Major. And I just wrote my first book called Something Major, the new playbook for women at work, which will be released on March 1st and is available for pre-sale right now. I'm joined today also by my friend and colleague, Iolani Bullock. Iolani, are you here with us?
Hello.
Hi, Iolani. Iolani is a Something Major veteran. We've had the opportunity to hear her incredible insights in events in the past. And for those of you who have never met Iolani before, she's the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Carlyle Group, where she drives global DEI strategy with a data-driven focus on programming and initiatives. In her spare time, she serves on the board of trustees for Global Citizens Public Charter School, which is the first public charter school to offer dual Mandarin and Spanish language immersion in DC. Iolani is also the children's book author of Lennox Takes Flight, a mother of two, and please reach out to her to ask her how you can book her to speak at your company for Black History Month. Iolani, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Randi.
I'm also going to go ahead and now introduce Dr. Jennie Byrne. Jennie, are you here with us?
Hey, everybody. Happy Friday.
Hey, I can't hear Jennie. Iolani, can you hear Jennie? Okay, perfect. Jennie lives to connect the dots between people and ideas in new and unexpected ways. As an MD PhD psychiatrist, Dr. Byrne is a clinical translator with strong people skills who enjoys bringing psychological savvy and EQ to complicated problems. Dr. Byrne is also the author of the now bestseller Work Smart. Jennie, can we see the book?
Here it is.
And I literally could not put this down. Jennie is such an expert on workplace, future of work, behavioral health, neuroscience. I can't wait to get her insights. And then finally, I want to introduce Ashley Hurd, who is the founder of the Manager Method. Ashley, are you joining us here today?
Hello.
Hey, Ashley. So the manager method, in addition to being my actual absolute positive favorite content on the internet, if you're not following Ashley on LinkedIn and TikTok, you are missing out on the best workplace content there is out there. But anyway, in addition to constantly going viral on TikTok, Ashley uses her experience as a general counsel and head of HR, combined with her knack for stand-up comedy, to create the best leadership, culture, management content out there. Ashley, could not be more excited to have you with us here today.
I'm excited, super excited to be here.
Phenomenal. And I know just by looking at this list, again, I'm sorry that we can't get the chat functionality working. I see people who I recognize as something major, regulars from New York, from Texas, from DC, from California. I think I saw one of our Parisian friends who often joins us. So thank you again. And we're going to keep working to see if we can get that chat fixed. Most importantly, as we talk today about making this your best year ever, we want to make sure that you're utilizing the Q&A functionality. So please, if you have a question for our panelists about tips and tricks that you want to hear from them on goal setting or prioritization, if you have questions that you want to hear from them about workplace trends and the future of work, put those in the Q&A. We can't wait to hear from you. So let's just jump back in. We're, a few weeks into a new year. And the conversation is all about women in work in 2023, what we need to do to launch our best year ever. And so as we jump into the conversation today, I'd love to hear from our panelists, what's been a highlight for you of 2022 and what's something you're personally looking forward to in 2023? Iolani, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah, I was thinking about this. What is a highlight in 2022? And, for thinking for myself, a lot of it was managing through transition. And I know that may not sound like a highlight or something really fun, but, we realize that growth and change aren't always comfortable. And looking back, I felt like I was really proud of myself. I was promoted at work. My son started in pre-K 3, a language immersion program. So I knew that would be a big transition for him. My husband had a new job. But I felt like I was able to rise to the occasion and really make all of that work. Did I have enough support? Would my son have enough support? I was really nervous about it, but I felt like it was a highlight because it really showed that when we buckle down, we figure out what is most important to us, we really are able to get it done. So that was absolutely a highlight, just sort of making it through all these big transitions, which have been really awesome looking back at them.
Yeah, and Iolani, we're going to talk more about this, right? The opportunity is to not just survive in times of transition, but thrive. I think for every woman who's joining us here today, we're going to talk about some of these tips. For every woman who's joining us here, there's a never-ending to-do list of things that we have to do that often stops us from the things that we want to do. So I'm really looking forward to coming back to you in our conversation and talking about some of the tips and tricks that you have. Ashley and Jennie, would you want to share a highlight from 2022 and something you're looking forward to?
I'll jump in first. So my highlight in 2022 was rediscovering a sense of play and creativity. And my biggest highlight related to that was, in addition to writing the book, which was another story, I restarted music performance and got in a band, and I got up on stage and played a new instrument. And then I got up on stage and I actually sang, which I don't sing at all. So it was a big stretch and way out of my comfort zone. So that was a big win. And then looking forward to this year, I feel like there's a fresh energy. I don't know. I feel like I have some energy that wasn't there. I feel like other people have energy. So I'm really looking forward to taking that energy and really making an impact this year.
Incredible. And Ashley, as I come to you, I want to tell people who are with us, I'm so sorry we can't get the chat figured out. However, I want to hear from you in the Q&A, and I can read some of these as they come in. A highlight for you of 2022. Let's celebrate these wins as a community. Ashley, a highlight for you in 2022 and something that you're looking forward to in 2023.
Yeah, so 2022 completely transformed my professional life. So I'd been very corporate before that point. I started a TikTok account just over a year, like January 14th of 2022, and had 0 followers, posting things, and it kind of was very slow growing. And so it was really an outlet for me to express things I'd had in my head or conversations I'd had for a long time. And it took time. It was certainly not overnight, but during the year, I ended up kind of hitting that wave. And so all of a sudden I went from being in my house, being very corporate, to being social media online. I started doing stand-up comedy and so very much kind of personal, professional. And so I felt like I cracked open my shell and have been living like an incredibly kind of authentic, engaging aspect of life. There's also been a lot of craze to it. So in 2023, in addition to joining the number of people that are dying to hear about your Post-it system, Randi and I think Jenny's got a little sly one on the right too. We were talking about that. I noticed this as well, everybody, but is having more of a focus, like, okay, I've done these things, but now is having that sustainability and how do I have that? And I know we'll touch on that as well. But so that's my 2023.
I love it. And yes, I don't think that our attendees can see the Q&A, but the Q&A is blowing up about my Post-it wall. And so I promise you that we will address the Post-its. We're starting to see some other questions come in. So, really there's two big trends that we're going to talk about today in terms of thinking about the internal and the external. What do we need to do with our internal selves to make it the best year ever? And what do we need to do? When I say externally, I mean navigating our shifting workplaces. So we talked a little bit about our goals. We're going to come back there. Iolani, you're an expert at diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ashley, you're an expert at the perspective from the HR and the general counsel's side of the business. And Jennie, you've been a former C-level executive and you just wrote a book on the future of work. Before we talk about our own goals, can we just set the stage? I think a lot of us are hearing about the future of work, or the future of work is now, or the next normal. Frankly, I feel like there's so much buzz that a lot of it is meaningless. Would each of you be willing to share one trend that you think is either going to impact women in the workplace in 2023, or you think they need to be aware of to really make sure that they can optimize and enhance their choices to really use these new trends to propel them forward instead of feeling like changes in the workplace are a headwind for them? Jennie, you want to start? If you can pick one.
Yeah, sure. I've been talking about future of work all year and researching it. So I would say that I would summarize, if I put it in one word, that the trend is humanism. And what I mean by that is a focus on people as human beings, as opposed to worker robots on some kind of assembly line. And this aha moment that we have mental health, we have physical health, we are humans, we are not all the same. You can't make assumptions about us. And oh, by the way, if you don't pay attention, you're going to lose your talent and you're going to tank your business. So there's actually a business case for humanism.
I love that. We have quite a few leaders who are here, so please take that with you. I see that all the time. We lose our best talent over disputes over small amounts of money or small shifts in the org chart that are so avoidable if we could just have a more human conversation and human perspective. Ashley and Iolani, any trends that you want to share for 2023 that you think the women in this call need to know about to make smart decisions and navigate through with grace?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really fostering inclusion and a hybrid environment. So, we've had a little bit of whiplash for a lot of companies where we went like no one's in the office to some people are in sometimes. I just saw, for instance, Disney said everyone has to come in 4 days a week because of the, need for us to be creative together. And so I think with all of that, for me, what I'm really trying to crack open and help, leaders think about is how do we make sure that all voices are heard, that we have flexibility, and that when we do have people come into the office, the time is maximized and optimized, and there's a reason to bring them together. It's not just for FaceTime or because we need people to sit in their desk and Zoom from their desks, right? And so really thinking about that, I think is going to be crucial. And the companies that get it right, and really it comes down to trust, like trusting that your employees are getting things done in their own way, on their own time, that's going to make a big difference.
And we actually already got some Q&A in the chat we got about 3 questions, that I'm just scrolling through here, right? About how do you feel about companies returning to the office? So Iolani, I think the pushes that you're making about really being inclusive in that approach are critical. Ashley, any other thoughts? I know that, again, you sit from the GC HR function.
Yeah, no, I think threading kind of all these needles together, a lot is focusing on the purpose. And for women in particular is being able to find your voice and have that conversation, knowing what you can influence, knowing what you can't, but getting to that clarity. So the Disney example or other organizations that say, we need to go back to the office. It's going to be 4 days a week, whatever day, because of, FaceTime or collaboration or creativity. Well, if you can have those conversations, especially if you're a leader, because a lot of people on your team hear that. And as women, we immediately go back to, March 8th, 2020 or whatever, and before, where all of a sudden we were doing the scramble of carpool and things. And a lot of us have been able to get out of that by working from home, by having that flexibility. And so the questions that a lot on your team are going to have are, how do we practically implement that? So especially female leaders. And again, this really cuts both gender issues, but having those conversations to say, pressing one on, is this necessary? If we're trying to get to collaboration, creativity is in the office, like, let's talk about that. And it might be, but then talking about the realities of what your team sees, like they want to do great work. They also want to live the presence of their lives. So how can we do that? Like, what if someone's coming to the office 4 days a week, can they leave at 2:30 or 3 to have carpool? And we need to be very vocal about that, and not just one-off with managers, but in our messaging, the thread that this is the business purpose, we're doing XYZ, but this is also the flexibility that we can give so that we're making sure that it meets your needs and your family's needs as well. I think those messages will be a lot more responsive. So I think you'll see hopefully some of that. And I'd love to see women leaders on this call include that as well.
I really think, and I think we can all agree, we're still in this transformative moment of redesign. The world is redesigning around us all the time. I think the savviest leaders are running experiments, seeing how it's going, and being unafraid to be transparent with their team. I think that the women who are thriving during this time of redesign are the women who are unafraid to be vocal about raising ideas, about making suggestions, about, like Iolani mentioned, inclusion, about speaking up when they see something that isn't inclusive and being a partner in redesigning that solution. With that said, there's the external trends, but one of the things that I hear all the time from women is that they're just too busy, work is too much, their plate is too full to think about their own personal goals and priorities. Every single one of you have achieved transformative things over the last few years. Iolani, I think about when you were writing your book, right in the middle of lockdown, taking on a board seat, starting a new job. Can you help us understand, for the women who are on this call, who are busy and stretched thin and overwhelmed, but also really hungering for something new this year, what tips do you have for them for prioritizing their own goals?
Yeah, I would say, 2, maybe 3 things, but I'll keep it very brief.
Yeah, you're good.
Focusing on simplicity. I feel like we are in this generation of like multitasking and, you're creating these Rubik's cubes in your life. When if we can just like sort of strip all things away and say, what has to be done? What do I want to do? But what do I need to do? It sort of helps us sort of boil it down to very, the bare minimum. And I think back to a point where I literally was pregnant with my daughter. My son was home, pandemic, lockdown. I had to join a call and I had contractors in my house. And so I created this Rubik's Cube for myself. I did it. But I literally said, okay, I'm going to join the call while in the car, get my son in the car and drive around my neighborhood in circles so he could nap while the contractors are working. And reflecting, I'm like, I could have said no. I could have asked to move the meeting. And I remember joining the meeting and saying, like whispering, because my son's sleeping, hi, everyone, I'm on the call. And they're like, do you need to be here? Like, are you okay? And I was sort of like, why am I doing this to myself? So just getting down to, can I say no? Can I move it like one thing at a time and not going into this frenzy of like, I have to multitask and do all these things. And I would say the other thing is, I think about that old proverb, like if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And we always think about having a village, especially around like families and children, that's really natural. But I also just think the other aspects of my life where I really need a village, as you both know, like writing a book, you need a village beyond your family. It's amazing. But I recently created a village of moms. We had a Momsgiving and I had all these friends just like take off on a Friday while the kids were in school and we did this thing. And that village has turned into an awesome tax advisor, a workout accountability coach, all these things by just creating that community around myself because I cannot do it alone and I need advice. And so recognizing that has been so huge for me.
And before I pass it to Ashley or Jenny, I just want to react to that. Iolani, you're hitting on so many things. A few of them I talk about in my book. One of them is this idea of saying no. I think we need to be unafraid to start saying no to things. And one of my favorite ways to say no to things is using that golden rule of improv, yes and. So instead of saying, no, I can't come, yes, I'd love to join the meeting and it's going to be hard for me to have a quiet place to take the call at that time. Can I suggest we move the meeting to Tuesday? Or yes, I I would love to help with this initiative. And we're going to have to sit down and just look at Q1, really H1 goals to see what our team can truly handle with integrity. I think that yes, and builds a lot of collaboration. And then Iolani, you hit another thing that's so important about goals. And we're going to talk about relationships in a few minutes. Our goals are contact sports. I'm going to say it again. Our goals are contact sports. We have to put them in contact with other people for the accountability, for the ideas, for the inspiration. It's too much for us to go it alone. Ashley, Jenny, what else would you add about goals?
I'm late to the game on James Clear, Atomic Habits. But what I love is his idea of like, if you have goals, it seems super daunting. But if you have habits, like the Post-its or things you're going to do. So rather than saying like this year, I'm going to launch a business. Like, okay, this year I'm going to read Atomic Habits and think about habits I can do, but like breaking things down into actionable things you can control and let everything else fall. And that I think can bring a lot of peace of mind and be a lot less daunting. But that's something for me that I've brought in that has probably transformed my life most practically than anything I've read in the last decade.
Jenny?
Well, first of all, let's get rid of resolutions. Quick funny story. I went to a yoga studio near my house on Sunday and I literally couldn't find a place to put my mat. And I was like, I can't be here. This is not working. It's because everybody had a January New Year's resolution. The owner said, give it a week. It'll be fine. It'll be back to normal. So I'd say let's get rid of resolutions. I love the framework of what I'm going to say yes to and what I'm going to say no to, because it puts the focus instead of a goal on the opportunities and the fact that for every opportunity there's a yes, there's got to be a no. So pulling on the threads of what the other ladies have said, saying no is a key part to all of this. And I love to keep the focus on like, what am I going to say no to? And we talked about sticky notes. You can't see, I have a wall of sticky notes behind my camera. One of them is what to say yes to this year. And one of them is what I'm going to say no to.
Incredible. I love that. My sticky notes are a little different and I'm going to address this because it does seem to be such a point of interest in just a moment. But Ashley, I'm just also late to the James Clear Atomic Habits party as well, apparently, and I'm listening to it now. And one of the things I've been trying just this week, just for the last few days, and this is a great tip. If anyone here is like, not I have a resolution, but I have like a habit that I want to start. So for me, I've enjoyed meditation, but I've never figured out how to put it into my routine. And so one of the things that James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits is this idea of habit stacking. If you have a super established habit, stack the new habit on top of that. So Jennie wrote about this in her book. I have these morning walks that are literally religious to me. I go on walks. They are where I solve all of the toughest problems, where I get that quiet time to think of the answer or deal with an issue. And so what I've done is I just come home now and I habit stack. I've been doing just a 5-minute meditation on top of that walk. So I sit down in the same chair, I open up my Peloton app, and I literally do whatever the first 5-minute meditation is. Like I take the guessing and the planning out of it. So I'm obsessed right now with habit stacking. If anybody has a goal that they've had for themselves that they're really struggling with. Another thing that I think when we feel stuck on our goals is, the Post-it notes behind me, they're actually the storyboard of my book. So, about a year ago, I was like in tears. I felt like my book was in my brain, but I could not connect that to the manuscript on paper. And so someone gave me great advice. It's just like, walk away from the computer and do whatever it is that's gonna get your brain working differently. And my sister-in-law is a comedy writer in Hollywood. And I remember seeing a storyboard in her office. And so I was like, oh, I'm just going to storyboard this. And so that's color coded. Each white sheet is a different chapter or idea. And then the color codes were just different kind of characters or plot lines. And it just ended up being a really great creative exercise. So someone asked in the chat, can I elaborate on this idea that goals are contact sports? I think when we feel stuck, we have to feel unafraid to ask for help. My comedy writer sister-in-law is probably not the person I would have asked for, help with something in my corporate life. But her different perspective is what was the moment of unlock. So share with friends, colleagues, network connections. The next question that I want to ask is about relationships. There was an interesting article that came out from Harvard Business Review last year that women are actually better relationship builders, However, we're the most likely to view networking as an extracurricular versus an essential. So Ashley, I'm going to ask you in a second about tough conversations in the workplace, but Iolani or Jennie, what are your thoughts on how women can think about networking in a fresh way, or think about relationship building in a way that's new and reinvigorated for 2023 to actually achieve their goals?
Well, I'll share. We had a speaker come to our company, and one thing he talked about was, our brains are biased, and you do sort of natural stereotyping, and one way to mitigate that is to learn 4 things about a person. It naturally sort of breaks down barriers and helps you see them from a different perspective. And that's one thing I've been trying to do, is learn 4 things about the person I'm about to meet with, so that when I walk into that conversation, especially if I know it's going to be a tough conversation, the barriers are down and I'm able to really sort of dig in from a neutral place because I have more information or built that relationship up front. And so that's my thing right now. It's like, I need 4 things, especially about a new person I'm going to meet or going to talk to again. And that really helps me to build the relationship and then sort of get to the point and be able to have a productive conversation.
That's great. I guess I would add, kind of like what I was saying before with the what to say yes to and the no to. So research shows us, and you've probably seen this, that our health is actually influenced by the people we surround ourselves with. And if we change social groups, our health will change and become more like the group that we're with. So it's very real that the people you surround yourself have a deep impact on not just your professional life, but your actual health. And so I would think about networking, if you want to frame it in terms of your health, you could do it that way, right? Like, I need to surround myself with the people that are going to support my health, as well as my professional life. And if I don't, and I surround myself with people who have a lot of negative energy or negative health habits or negative things, I'm really setting myself up to fail. So I frame it, it's almost like a necessity. It's not like an option. Like, if you don't do this and you surround yourself with negativity, you're really impacting your health in a very negative way. Like, it's almost like smoking cigarettes. Like, surround yourself with negative people. It's almost like you're smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. So I frame it as, again, who am I going to say yes to? Who am I going to say no to? What's the energy that I want for the upcoming year? And it's like, I try to make it kind of serious to myself. And stepping out of the bad relationships is harder for me. Like, making new friends or new connections is always great. I love that part, but saying no is actually, for me, much harder. So what relationships, I've had to say no to some hard relationships last year. And I think that's often the harder part.
You make a great point. It's like quitting smoking. I'll take an opportunity to remind people that Dr. Byrne is an MD, PhD, psychiatrist, and neuroscience scientist. And I'll say that because I think in the leadership world, people talk about brain terminology all the time. This is a woman who knows her stuff. And I think you just blew my mind and everyone else's mind when you just talked about toxic relationships as the equivalent of smoking a pack a day. Like, I'm going to take that in for a hot second. And I'm going to pass it to Ashley. Ashley, I would love if you would tell us a little bit about Luke, who is the star of all of your TikTok videos, and ways that you think women can negotiate that tone-deaf leader in their organization.
Yeah. So yeah, my TikTok, I started them and really in middle of last year, started doing these role plays where I was talking, I was like on this side of the screen talking to this fictitious-ish bad boss. And I've realized that Luke is very common in corporate and other non-corporate environments. And it's this idea of an individual. I actually saw a tweet on this that really spoke to me that said, one of the reasons a lot of people are bad is because they've lived their life experience and they can't fathom other people's life experience. So they think it should always be this way. So this idea of Luke happens to be a male, but I'm sure we can think of some Miranda Priestley's that also fit this equation. But this is the idea of someone that's probably had it pretty well, hasn't really struggled, and thinks there should be this hierarchy, and thinks really in that scarcity leadership mentality, meaning that more for them means less for me. Or the other analogy I give to my kids to explain this, who my kids love Luke and talking about Luke, but is this idea, because I think it relates to kids just as much as it relates to adults, is when someone does something bad in any way, it's because they're mad or scared or stressed. And I think there is this fear at that top that those leaders would never want you to see. And they probably pay, another man like hundreds of thousands of dollars to figure it out. But you can tell you, a lot of them are scared of that power, or that they'll be seen as weak if everybody else looks strong. And so what I tell to women in particular, as you're dealing with this, is to see people where they are. And, just like Iolani kind of talked about, is thinking about breaking down those walls. You have to meet people where they are. And I think that's true. And that can be really humbling in the real sense as a female leader, not like I won an Oscar, I'm humbled, but like humbled of like, I'm going to have to really give this asshole my, give him my attention. Sorry. It's at school, so I don't think any kids are listening, but like.
We started this webinar by playing Lizzo. So
right, we're fine.
Explicit language has already happened. You're totally good, Ashley.
I think we're good. And those have worked with me know that's probably most, least offensive of things I say.
We're keeping it human, to quote Dr. Byrne.
But
That's right.
Like, get frustrated. Like, why is it my job to meet this person? And I say, everyone has to make a choice. And I say big in this, you also have to make a choice of whether you want to do this, or you have the energy, or whether you think it is possible. And I think people should know more is possible to change in people than you sometimes think. But also at a certain point, for your health, to Jennie's point, you can't continuously, if people show you who they are, believe them. And there are plenty of other organizations that are far more deserving of your time, your energy, your talents, and the other employees there will benefit them than if you're pigeonholed by someone that just doesn't want to hear it. And so I think go on, Randy.
Go you first.
Well, so I think approaching every conversation with through the year, I talked to Luke, and I also always tried to keep respectful. And sometimes people say it's condescending. And I say, well, I probably do get a little condescending with Luke because some ideas are bad, but I take that to heart. And so I always want someone to hear that I'm listening and I'm big in planting flags. And I'll say, look, I know as a leader, you probably have a lot more stress than you let on, and you have all these people's livelihoods. And I recognize that's probably scary, and trying something new, and like the things that I put forth can cost money or take time and energy. And so I recognize that can be really challenging. And so I'll try to, when you meet people, they are, and some of it is, even that ego stroking of like, you've gotten to where you've gotten, and to saying a lot of people want to get there. We have to make that path clear for them and make them want to do that. So what does that look like? And so a lot of it framing, putting yourself in those shoes. And showing that there can be benefits. I'm not a Pollyanna. I've worked in corporate America. I've led layoffs, and there's some comments in here about how layoffs need to be more humane. And I completely agree on that, completely. But so I think showing people in leadership that you can thread that needle between driving business goals, but also treating people well, that you can make any situation more bearable or more terrible with the ways that you act. And if your goal is to succeed as a business, then you better be focusing on how to make things more bearable and really invigorating your people. And so it can be tying things to business outcomes, financial outcomes, that can speak volumes to a lot of people, but also walking into conversations that someone's not dreading you coming through that door. You have to show some of that personality and humility and meet them where they are as well. So that's kind of how at the very end of the year, Luke gave a very nice holiday message. And I had so many things on TikTok, like, why am I crying? I was like, I cried, like, making this, and people like, this is a made up person. And I'm like, recognize this. But I do think you want to see this hero arc. And so sometimes you can paint it to this person and say, pull up our glass door, like, look at our glass door. Our glass door, people think that you are a complete asshole. How does that feel? And like, yes, the people that go to put that, but what are ways that we can build things up, and how would that feel to completely change how people think and feel about our organization? And that's a way that at times can, I guess, speak to that ego play, but you can get a lot of benefit for employees by calling attention to that.
I love what you said, Ashley, about you can either make things more bearable or more terrible. And I think that you've given everyone who's on this call who's in a position of leadership some serious concrete mandates that they need to follow. And building on that, I want to make a push to everyone that we also do that to ourselves. We have the opportunity to make things more bearable or more terrible. So I had a woman, one of my coaching clients, come to me a few months ago, and some toxic things happening at work, some issues. She said, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to quit my job. And I said to her, you can quit your job, but are you going to quit your bad habits? Because you take those habits with you everywhere you go. So maybe her boss wouldn't be as toxic. Maybe the environment wouldn't be as troubled, but her own boundary busting behaviors, her own constant putting her self-care second, her own decisions where she devalues her time, she takes those with her. And there are so many successful women who have gotten to where they are in spite of what I call, bad work habits. And I'm not pointing fingers, and I'm not making anybody feel bad. I just want us to keep it real about the impact that we have with our own decisions, because there's the Lukes of the world and the good leaders, and then there's the part of us that makes good decisions and bad decisions. And I'm curious, we're going to get back to some of these questions in a second. You know, Iolani and Jennie, would love to hear from you. One of the things that I hear from women a lot is this push and pull between boundaries and taking care of myself and taking care of everybody else's needs. That's whether you're a caregiver or not a caregiver, whether you're looking towards retirement or you're just stepping into that first leadership role. I think this is something that's so universal. And as we think about giving the women on this call tips and tricks to truly launch their best year ever, what do you want to encourage or inspire them to think about when it comes to boundaries and self-care? Iolani, I'll send it to you first.
Yeah, I think, you know, with boundaries, it's easy to create them in your head, but to communicate them is really hard. And so having the really, you know, being able to go out and say that and being really brave and telling your manager, your partner, whoever it is, like, you need time is important for you, because if you don't do it, like, it will creep up on you. And you know, Dr. Byrne, with the health aspect, I think is so critical because it sort of runs in everything that we're talking about here. And so, you know, for me, I really have to chunk my time even to just think, because if it's open on my calendar, someone's going to book it. And so I have to just chunk my time out. That's really helpful. Also, just being really communicative with my team in terms of what I need and need to leave early or to do what I need to do. But then I would also say, being really vulnerable sometimes has been helpful for me. Just last week, my son was having just a really bad day at school. He's 4, but he said something to his teacher that didn't sit well with her. So she called me and was like, I think you should come and get him. And it was middle of the day, stacked calendar. And I just said to my team, I got to go get my son. And they were like, what do you need us to do? And then I shifted things. I was able to log in a little bit later, do a few little things I had to do, but I went back to my boss the next day and just said, thank you. Like I needed to run, and I know that sort of caused a lot of turmoil. And she said, but I trust you. Like, when you do what you need to do, when you need to do it, because I know that that's a really important aspect of your life. And if your son's not okay, you're not okay. And if you're not okay, you're not going to be able to, you know, perform at your best. And hearing that was like such a sigh of relief. I mean, I don't think she even realized how much weight she lifted off of me just with those few words. And so, you know, being able to do that and to say that took a lot, but it was so helpful and made our relationship even better, which is now, you know, making me want to perform even more.
Dr. Byrne?
So I can talk about this for like 10 hours, Randi. So let me tell you a quick story. So this topic, I've actually been very angry about this topic. So I'm a doctor, and the reason I'm telling you that's for the story. So I had one other doctor in my family, who was my grandfather. He died when I was little. But the stories I hear about my grandfather as a doctor, he'd go out, he'd see patients, he'd come home, and what would happen? He would have quiet. Nobody would talk to him for an hour. He would change clothes. He would go down. And as he came down the stairs, a frosty beer would appear on the table with a perfectly heated plate of food. You know, he would enjoy his food. They would turn on his favorite TV show. His children would be in pajamas and walk in front of him, and he would pat them on the head. And, you know, and I was thinking, as a woman physician, what does society expect my evening will look like when I came home from seeing patients? I'll tell you what, it wasn't that. No, my expectation, as many of the women on this call who work very difficult jobs, you know, I come home while I'm in the car, someone's bothering me, I have to go pick up something. Then I get home and everyone's like, what's for dinner? I'm like, I don't cook. I don't know. What did you make dinner? I didn't make dinner. Then there's the homework brigade, and then there's some call, you know, I mean, it's just a never ending thing. And then maybe you carve like 15 minutes of yourself. So, you know, compare and contrast. It makes me really angry that society, this is still kind of the expectation. And you know, what makes me even angrier is that women put this same expectation on themselves. That's what makes me really angry. And so I've tried to channel my anger into boundary setting. And I'll just challenge actually one more thing here on the call, which is I don't love the term self-care. And here's why I actually don't. And I'm a psychiatrist, right? Like, this is my job. I don't like the word self-care because it implies that women are caregivers. And the reality is we are caregivers. I get it. Totally get it. That is the reality. But saying self-care makes it sound like it's on me and no one else to take care of myself. Whereas my grandfather with his frosty beer every night on the table, it was everybody else's job to come and take care of him after he spent a day taking care of others. So I think, for me, the self-care is really like expectations of other people too. I expect other people to take care of me. I expect for people to be helping at the house. I expect, I delegate. I tell everybody I have a full-time household employee. I'm privileged to be able to do that. But you know what? That's what works. So I think having other people take care of you in addition to you carving the time for yourself is really important, because it's not all up to you to take care of your health, right? The other people around you should be taking care of you as well, just the way that you take care of them. So I'll just throw that out there to be a little bit of provocative. I don't love the word self-care. But in terms of like a practical tip for actually making it happen, I researched this a lot for the book. Cognitively, chunking like tasks is really helpful. So carving time for yourself by looking at your email for a period of time and then turning it off. Multitasking cognitively is a myth. It doesn't actually, our brains cannot multitask. So I can talk about that for hours, but that's a practical tip of like chunking like tasks.
I'm going to say one thing about that, and then I'm going to share a question with Iolani and Ashley for their perspectives. I just finished Dr. Byrne's book maybe 3 or 4 days ago, and this idea, she goes in depth about the neuroscience of why multitasking doesn't work and why time chunking does. I've been time chunking for 3 days, and even my own team was like, I don't understand like how you're getting through so many things so quickly. You're so ahead of this thing. Like even other people are noticing it. Like I thought it was just me. So it's one of the many mind-blowing insights in Jennie's book. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm sitting here right now and I'm like, I got to figure out whatever the equivalent is of my frosty beer. So I'll be taking that away with me, even though no one's there to hand it to me. One of the questions we got in the chat comes from Faith, and it's about inclusion. And she asked, we hear a lot about inclusion when it comes to lifestyle choices, ethnicity, and religion. But can you speak to hiring individuals with cognitive disabilities? For instance, if someone has dyslexia, they may struggle with written communication. They may also feel uncomfortable to venture into a corporate space. So Iolani, I know that you lead DEI for Carlisle. Through your efforts, Ashley, you have a lot of experience on the HR side. Would either one or both of you like to quickly weigh in on 1 or 2 things that you think hiring managers should consider, or women who are joining this call who might have cognitive disabilities consider about navigating that space?
Yeah, I think for me, we try to reframe it to think about people that just have different abilities. Like our abilities are different. The way we need to see the world or things that we need in order to get our jobs done is different. And so, I think that companies are still figuring out how to do that. There's so much, and Ashley, I'm sure from the HR perspective, in terms of collecting that information and being able to have that up front in order to make the right accommodations that you need. But for us, we try to make sure our hiring managers know that when they're looking to hire someone for an open position, they're not just supposed to be replacing the person that was there, but thinking about what value add can help the team be better. What different types of thinking, different ways of thinking, different backgrounds are going to add value to the team versus just replacing and sort of doing the typical churn. And part of that are different ways of thinking, different ways of working. And so, while I think we're still sort of trying to figure out how exactly companies do that in the best way for both them and for potential candidates and employees, it is something that is so important. And we're hearing more and more about the neurodiversity space specifically, and doing more research into it.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, this is something, so my background, I've been an employment lawyer before becoming a general counsel, and although nothing I ever give is legal advice, but in HR as well, this is an area where they really thread, because there is the legal obligation to really focus on the essential functions of the job. And if anyone has different abilities, and Iolani, I love how you put that, it's different abilities, it's not disabilities, because you tend to have shine in other ways. And people feel like just because I'm not good in this area, I shouldn't go into these corporate spaces. So Faith, I love this question. question. But I think two things. One is you really need to think about what's essential. So if it's communicating, there's a lot of ways to communicate, So thinking about what that's like, it's not always essential that it be in this specific format. And I say that having worked at a very large consulting firm where everything was in the very exact specific deck. But I mean, like, the way you communicate there can be so many different ways. And so it's important as you talk about the job post, everything from the job posting to interview questions, to thinking about it. Also thinking about overall the position. Who are they working with? Is this an opportunity that you think, I wouldn't want someone with different cognitive abilities because they'd have to work with this person who's a complete jerk? Well, why not address that situation of the complete jerk? Because I don't care what someone's abilities are, that's going to be a roadblock. And so sometimes when you're thinking about these types of questions, it can really unearth a larger issue, and that's the problem to solve. But so I think in organizations, I hate the word tolerance. I'm assuming everyone on this, I basically hate the word tolerance altogether when it comes to anything with disabilities or abilities or diversity, but tolerance is a very weak sauce level. But so I think celebrating and giving support, because there's so many times, and this is absolutely true in the DE&I space, you bring someone in the door and then you leave them frequently to flounder because they're looking around and they don't know what's expected of them. And so this is why I think it's especially important. A lot of organizations have, women's resource group, or they may have different. I think having individuals, especially that are vocal in leadership, and it's a very private, so I get it. People don't always want to, but I think if leaders can talk about the different ways they communicate, or when you've heard, like when Joe Biden has talked about his stutter, I remember hearing that story, and when they talk about how many people that affected. And I think in business, a lot of people that have had dyslexia, or still to this day, they haven't just overcome something, but they succeed with different abilities. I think having that vocally is really important to make people feel more welcome. So again, Faith, I love that.
These are such great insights. My husband grew up with a coding and sequencing learning disability. And ironically, he codes for a living. And if you ask him why, he's like, code's the best because like it won't run if there's an error. Versus do not ever ask him to proofread a PowerPoint document because his spelling, he's not dyslexic, but like with this coding and sequencing disorder, he cannot see easy typos and misspellings that like you and I would see. And so I remember like he just shared that with an employer who asked him to proofread a slide deck. And he was like, I don't see anything, but what you should know about me is I'm the worst person to ask, right? And just own it. And we could get into a whole conversation about how men can own that differently than women, but I think it's still an insightful story. Another question that we got in the Q&A was, someone asked, she wants to start a business this year. So, we have people who want to start a business. I almost want to broaden this and say, we have a lot of women here who are looking to make a pivot, whether that's going out on your own. And I will tell you that women and moms in particular are the #1 fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs, or people who are looking to just make a pivot. Like, do any of you have a place, like just a few really quick tips, like where to start if you are looking to make a pivot to something new, different, bigger, not just like the next promotion in your job?
I mean, I can give a tip here.
Yeah.
So I'd gone from being a general counsel, head of HR, and with everything with COVID, like what am I going to do? Having sat with my then kindergartner across the dining room table, I just felt completely burnt out. Silver lining was it made me rethink everything. And so I thought, for years I'd had this idea of wanting to start a business. We lived abroad in Australia for a while, which again I could talk for 10 hours about. But so what I did is I knew, especially having been a lawyer, a little bit risk averse, even though I'm probably the least risk averse lawyer, but what I was able to do is to work with a couple anchor clients and start to do work for them while doing it on my own. And so I think if you try to make one giant leap, there's people that have done it, but I do think it's important to have something to start with, whether it's keeping your current job and thinking about different things. You hear people talk about passive income. There's a lot of work that goes into passive income. Some of the passive income I've built are not long books like all three of these ladies on the panel that are like, you needed a village about. I have books I put together like in a few hours that are like journal, like new employee guidebook journals. I put these together. Like I didn't have a village, didn't need one. It's not as intensive, but also it's super easy. And so I put those together, did a TikTok. At the time, I think I had like 4,000 followers on TikTok. I went to #1 on Amazon for this thing that day because it was just something that had lived in my brain. And so I think doing something small that you create in your head, again, going back to this idea of a big goal, starting to do those steps, because I have like 3 logos of management. I have hats I had from 4 years ago, but it took me a long time to take action. So I think taking action and stopping caring what people are thinking about you and doing little steps, but keeping your foot, because I think it'll add more pressure if you try to just take one big leap. So having that, but also having a path, hopefully, if that's what you want to do, to be able to kick back some of those existing clients when you get to a big enough point.
I love that. Jennie, Iolani, any thoughts on making a pivot?
Yeah, I would say you have to, like, similar to what Ashley said, like, take the step. I think I read that, men apply to a job if they only have 60% of the qualifications, but women wait till they have 100%. It's like, wait a minute, just do it. Take the first step. I would also say find someone who's in it or an expert who can give you information that maybe you don't have, so that you're making more informed decision. But it doesn't have to be perfect to start, but also even if it is perfect, that means that maybe there's no room to change or adapt or have new information, which oftentimes makes it better than the original concept.
I love it.
I would tie into these thoughts. I coach some women leaders, and there's a lot of the sequencing myth of women in particular. I have to do this, and then I'm like the worst because I have like all these degrees, right? So clearly I bought into that for way too long. But this, like, I have to give this, and then I have to have a degree, and then I need an MBA, and then I need this and this and this and this. And so, like Ashley said, or Iolani said, just starting small, like something small, like just do it. And like, if it messes up, so what? I think this idea, I have to leave my job and quit everything, and then I have to start this whole new thing, and I need a business plan, and I need a loan, and I need this, and it's like the sequencing myth, and then you just get in your own way and it never happens. So I would agree with what everybody said.
I think there's so much truth in small steps, in experimentation, in leveraging people around you. I mean, the other thing that I would just add is that I think sometimes we treat these pivots as like doing a keg stand versus enjoying a fine wine. And what I mean by that is, like, we think we just have to do it all. And someone's like holding us upside down and we're like guzzling from this keg. And then like, you get maybe like, drunk right away, and all you wake up with the next morning after guzzling all of it is like a bloated belly and a hangover, right? And I think sometimes we go so hard on our goals in the first few days or first few weeks that we treat it like a keg stand, and we're left a few weeks later with a hangover. But with a fine wine, we sip and savor, right? So we take just small sips, like those first small steps, and then we savor. We have to celebrate wins along the way. Like, I think about some of the things when I started something major, which by the way was like a passion that became a side business, that became a full-time business that now employs other women. Like, if you had told me what it was going to be 4 years ago when I first started this, I would have never done it because it would have overwhelmed me. So I hope that this year we can all just treat things like those goals, those pivots, fine wine. You're here to sip those small steps, savor, celebrate the wins, and hopefully share with other people, right? Share your wins, invite them in. We're going to wrap in just a minute or two. I'd love to go around our panel one more time to share just one piece of advice that you have for women to make 2023 their best year ever. So if you had one piece of advice, and then I know our chat, again, thanks for your grace, everyone. Bad tech things happen to good people all the time. Our chat wasn't working, but in the Q&A, I'd love for you to share one thing that you're taking away from today. So if you would share in the chat one thing you're taking away from today, and I'm going to throw it to our panel, lightning round style, what is one thing that you think every woman needs to know to make 2023 her best year ever?
I'd say figure out what actually makes you feel good and do that, and everything else, get rid of it.
I agree with that 100%. Think about, and that's stop caring about what others will think. The way I frame that in real life is don't think about how good it's going to feel to announce your new job or new whatever on LinkedIn. Think about how you're going to feel every single morning when you are, and every Sunday evening, whether you're going to sleep through that and what that experience is going to be like.
I would say think bigger, be brave, and channel positive energy from other people and get rid of the negative stuff.
These are such amazing pieces of advice. The only other thing that I would add is I think we need to start having a sanity first approach to things. Just figuring out what it is, whether it's our boundaries, or I'm going to use self-care for now because I haven't figured out the synonyms since Jennie blew my mind a few minutes ago, like the hacks, the small, tiny 1% moments, because research from Harvard shows that just taking a 30-second micro moment of self-care in your day can have a macro impact in your productivity and your fulfillment. I think sometimes we underestimate those small moments. So I'm all about sanity first. I always say at a Something Major event, it's less about taking these tips as a prescription and more as a buffet. Every woman who joined us here today is a different learner, a different leader, has a different origin story, a different set of goals. And as I scroll through, what people are taking away, goals are a contact sport, not a disability, but a different ability. Time chunking, finding my version of the frosty beer, humanism. It's okay to say no to things that don't serve me. Someone's already plugging our books, which I'm going to get to in a second, for Dr. Jennie, for Iolani, for myself. These go on and on. And I really want to thank you all for joining us here today. Time is our most precious and our only non-renewable resource. I know that we enjoyed the conversation, and I want to let you know how you can keep in touch with our incredible panel. So first, Ashley Hurd, if you are not following Manager Method on TikTok, you are not using your smartphone correctly. So please make sure that you're following Manager Method on TikTok, and you can also find her, Ashley Hurd, on LinkedIn, and also her Manager Method website, which has amazing training. I want to highlight Dr. Byrne. You can find her on LinkedIn as Jennie Byrne. Her book, Work Smart, is available on Amazon now. Buy this book. Iolani Bullock, you can find her on LinkedIn. You can find her book, Lennox Takes Flight, on Amazon. And please get in touch with her if your organization is looking for an incredible speaker for Black History Month. Iolani does public speaking at other companies. And I've already referred her to some of my own clients. Her insights are always incredible. Finally, if you want to keep in touch with me, if you're new to Something Major, definitely check out our website, www.somethingmajorcoaching.com. Tons of free replays of events and resources. You can pre-order my new book, Something Major, the new playbook for women at work, right now. It'll be delivered to you on or around March 1st. Amazon makes those rules, not me. I want to encourage you to stay subscribed, come to our free community events, save the date for June 9th, which will be our signature Realign and Recharge retreat at the Four Seasons in Georgetown. We may or may not have some retreat alums on this panel today, so ask them if you're curious about what it's like. I think Dr. Byrne just volunteered herself. And Iolani, Dr. Byrne will be at my retreat on February 3rd at the Ritz Georgetown for working moms. Thank you all so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you at the next Something Major event. Bye, everyone.
Bye.